Everyone, the story this week is from the book of Isaiah. Now, Isaiah lived in a time when the sword was the way of the land. The Assyrians had taken this land for themselves. They had taken this other land for themselves. They had come in and they had taken Judah for themselves. And Jerusalem was next. The capital city, it was next. Now, King Sennacherib sends a message to King Hezekiah, who is king over Israel, and tells him, Hezekiah, it's time to give up. It's time to surrender. If you don't, we are going to slaughter you. You can either live under our sword or you can die by our sword. It's your choice. What say you? Now, this isn't a story that's just stuck in time thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, it's still a story that's very relevant today. There are plenty of wars around the world where people are still fighting each other. It may be with guns, it may be with missiles, it may be with other things, but there's still physical violence. People are dying at the hands of weapons of war every day. And that's a sword. But I think you have to ask yourself, is that the only sword? Are there other swords? Can we think about the sword in a different way? If a sword is a weapon of war, if a sword is something that causes death and destruction around us, what are some of the other swords that we face today? For example, drugs. I very much believe there's the sword of drugs. I sat with a mom this last week who had lost her son, who was 30 years old. She lost him 2 years ago to drugs, the sword of drugs. Now, it took his physical life, and now she suffers just life being sucked out of her all the time because she lost her son 2 years ago, and it was the sword of drugs. Another example, gun violence. It's very much still a thing today. Now, sometimes the sword of gun violence kills the victim. It takes the victim. It physically steals life away from them. But what about those who are left behind? For those left behind, they still suffer mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They're having the life sucked out of them too because they've lost a loved one. What about something like abusive words? Abusive words, that's a sword that cuts people apart every single day. We either can lift people up with our words or we can tear them apart with our words, but it's very much a sword. There are so many swords in the world that we probably couldn't even possibly name them all. We couldn't possibly name all the different things that steal life from people, but it's a sword. So when Isaiah comes along and all of this is happening and it's stealing life away from all the people, when Isaiah comes along and he has this bold message, he says, walk in the light of the Lord, you have to ask, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to walk in the light of the Lord? And Isaiah answers it. It's to beat your swords into plowshares. It's to beat your weapons of war into instruments of life. It's to take those things that cause death and it's to turn them into life. It's very much the resurrection. It's very much God, by the power of the Holy Spirit, raising Jesus from the grave, turning death into life. Now, my challenge for you and my challenge really for myself this week is that we kind of hit pause and we acknowledge that we probably have some swords in our own lives. If we're honest about it, we probably have words or our actions in our own lives that steal life away from people.